Bharat, Karnad, don't score brownie points. Have a patient dialogue. Keep the dialogue lines open, because you are ultimately not dealing with a basket case of a country. You're dealing with a global power. And therefore, you have to, while you have to stand up, push back as hard as you can, but you have to accept the real political reality.
Yeah, and what's the political reality? The point, I think, is I'm astonished by the kind of defeatism I hear on this show. I mean, someone said that, you know, there's no harm in Xi and Modi meeting. There's no harm in doing this. There's no harm in doing that. We can safely leave off talking about Depsang and the Kubrang Valley and all that. Why? Because it was done before 2020 Galwan clashes. What kind of nonsense is this? I mean, if you're serious about having a dialogue of equals with Beijing, then you cannot have this attitude wherein you say, you talk on terms that the Chinese have laid down. This has been our problem. We seem awed by the Chinese power. China is like India, for God's sake. It's a country that wants to become a great power. It's far from being one. It's like us. We have pretensions.
You know, there is this article in Foreign Affairs just this morning, Einar Tangen, which you may have read, which talks about the kind of problems behind that dark iron curtain. The fact that many of your cities are locked down, you still haven't been able to deal with the pandemic, the fact that the economy is in recession, the fact that you've got a real estate debt crisis that seems to have burst, and that President Xi Jinping might be trying to exude a greater sense of authority and imperial power than he actually enjoys.
Well, the point is...
Well, as I've said before, that you seem to be concentrating on smaller issues rather than the larger ones. I was not suggesting that Xi and Modi were going to settle the border issue. That is going to take a much longer period of time and a certain amount of trust on both sides, and that has to be built. The only way you could build trust is to have meetings and dialogue. I don't know how you build trust by threatening wars and, you know, doing these kind of passive-aggressive things, as my former colleague was talking about. You know, it's very simple. You know, the world is on the precipice of global warming. India has, you know, basically stopped exports of certain parts of their rice crop. The world is in an energy crisis, especially as it applies to natural gas. People are using more coal. That's adding to the problems that we have with global warming. And yet, the only thing that my three colleagues can talk about seems to be whether or not goat pastures in these areas are important to both countries.
Well, if the Chinese army hadn't come into what you call goat pastures, it would have been a different matter. Sushant Sareen, Einar Tangen says Indian experts and the Indian government should see the larger picture. Global recession, global warming, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, Europe running out of fuel. There's a lot that's going on, and that's much more than some passages of land where nothing much grows, Sushant Sareen.
So what makes him think that we are not looking at the larger picture? In fact, the Prime Minister has been talking about the larger picture, whether it's energy issues, whether it's global warming, a whole range of climate change. He's been talking about it all over the place. So for the Chinese people to imagine that, you know, India is only worried about the these tiny little pastures, so why are the Chinese then encroaching upon these tiny little pastures? If they are such a great power, such a middle kingdom, such a, you know, whatever delusions they have about themselves, then maybe they can withdraw from these places. Now, the other part is that a conversation between the Chinese, the Indian and the Chinese principles does not mean that we are going to go and do jihazuri out there. Now, either we can say that we can do the tutu meme that, you know, is very often on television screens and on, you know, newspaper columns and what have you, or you can have a conversation with them and you tell them where they get off. And I don't see what is the problem with that. Did I for a moment say that we should go out there as a supplicant and say, "Ke Mai Baap, please give us back Depsang and
Karnad
Demchok"?
disagrees with that. He's shaking his head vehemently, wanting to contest what you're saying, Sushant.
We have brought Depsang and Demchok onto the table. We have linked it up with the current standoff. And even the latest statement of the MEA says that all outstanding issues need to be settled. Now, what more do you want to do? Let's go and declare war otherwise.
What you're saying is impractical, Bharat, Karnad. You can't declare war. Tell Xi Jinping where he gets off.
No, this is ridiculous. You know, the point is not that. I think earlier the diplomat on the show just said that most of the hard work, in fact, any talking of any substantive kind on any issue is done at not even the foreign minister level, but at the level of the ambassador and the foreign secretary. Now here you are, trying to pole vault onto the stage where, at the summit level, where Modi and Xi are supposed to sit down and talk what? I'm sure, I don't know how conversant Modi is with the Kubrang Valley and the actual disposition of forces and so on. And what will he say then to Xi? Assuming Xi is far more conversant simply because he's on the CNC, he's far more aware and briefed on military matters than perhaps Modi is. Then what do you do then? I mean, the point is that here you are, putting the conversation and the onus on Modi and Xi, when actually this has to be done at the military commanders level, which are dud, and at the level of the foreign minister, which again has, begotten nothing. And you want to do then have Modi meet with Xi for Xi to then say, here it is. And by the way, they're going to arrange it so that Modi comes to Xi. You won't even have the pleasure of Xi coming over to where Modi is staying. And that's how, by the way, the imagery is always managed. And,
no, but you're assuming that Prime Minister Modi would accept that, given his attitude, his posture. He's hardly going to...
What attitude and posture? I'm sorry, what attitude and posture?
He went to Ladakh at the height of the crisis and spoke very boldly and aggressively. The fact of the matter is, unlike the salami slicing of the past, the Indian army has stood its ground. Bharat, Karnad, that's a fact.
No, it's not a fact, because you have, in image terms, you basically have conceded the ground to China.